Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Wednesday, April 17th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game in 136 days, the game against Michigan in 227 days. The transfer portal has officially opened, and two Buckeyes have gone into it. One of them, not really a surprise. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. But first, the first piece of news, the first person to officially jump in that we didn't really have a, obvious heads up last week that this was going to happen is safety Cedric Hawkins, former four-star commit in the class of 2023. Tony Gerdeman with BuckeyeHuddle.com joins me. Tony, this one, I would certainly not qualify this one as a surprise. Cedric Hawkins did not play as a true freshman after arriving in the summer. And, this spring we saw him obviously, but it felt like there was not a real clear path to the playing field for him this year.
Yeah, when we talk about guys who enter the portal, a lot of times we talk about the formula of this is your third or fourth year and you still haven't played and you've been passed up by somebody younger. And so this was just a second-year guy. But if you look at it, he was with the Threes on Saturday, has been with the Threes most of spring at free safety. And that's with Malik Hartford being out. So you bring Malik Hartford back in, and now you're talking about Cedric Hawkins is running with the fours, which isn't really a thing. That's the walk-ons, that's the scout team. And you also factor in that true freshman Jalen McLean has moved ahead of him in the spring. Didn't take him long. And in fact, I believe he was out there. Jalen McLean was the second team free safety for spring practice number one, as I think back on it. So the writing on the wall was there probably for Hawkins. And so, yeah, it's a deep-ish room, but we've seen the secondary at Ohio State struggle through injuries. And in fact, maybe a little bit this spring with some of the guys that were out or they're holding back. So don't necessarily want to lose people, but I think there's still like a couple of guys over right now. So, this was not a huge surprise, let's just say.
And the other thing that makes this not a huge surprise is Ohio State had a change at the safety coaching position this offseason. Perry Elano was let go at the end of last season. Matt Guerrieri came in, and Hawkins was a 2023 signee, which is when Guerrieri was at Indiana and Perry Eliano was in charge at Ohio State. And sometimes you come to play for a guy, sometimes you come to play for a system, and it turns out you're not a good fit. So that I think maybe potentially factors into this one as well. They've had a lot of turnover at that safety position over the last few years. And I was just kind of trying to think through, the last like 3-4 years and kept coming up with names. Kai Stokes transferred after last year and Andre Turrentine. And, there were a kid who went to Louisville who, they have had a ton of guys kind of shuffling through there. And, that is a position that is a significant one at Ohio State. Jim Knowles talks about this being a safety-driven defense a lot. And so they ask a lot of those guys. And, that may be, you may be getting something more than you thought you were when you're signing up. But there's a lot of demand there, and they have a very, very talented safety room. But that can be a very tough place to be.
Yeah, you're asking them a lot. You're putting a lot on them. In Jim Knowles' defense, you could be a nickel, and on the next play, you're basically the free safety because of the way the shift has gone with the receivers. But I mean, you're also talking about you've lost Sonny Styles from that safety room as well because he's playing linebacker. So it's gotten thinner. And if you look through the roster right now, I don't know that anybody else is necessarily going to be leaving from the safety room, and they've got. Nobody's going to listen to Ohio State complain, we only have Caleb Downs and Lathan Ransom as starters and then some guys behind them. Like nobody's going to, there's going to be no pity party for Ohio State there. But you're right, it is a lot to ask. We've seen some in the spring game and throughout spring practice where even Caleb Downs is essentially playing a linebacker at times or playing the slot at times as the free safety, obviously doing the post, the deep safety stuff. And so it is a lot, and it's not something where you're just, I'm just the safety. I just stand back, 15 yards off the line of scrimmage and don't let anybody get past me. Much more involved than that. We've seen plenty of blitzing from that. So it is tough. And that's why when, like a Jalen McLean comes in and picks it up pretty quick, I'm sure it's one of those things where Cedric Hawkins can look at it and be like, well, that didn't take long.
And Jalen Jansen Dunn was the other guy I was trying to remember from last year. He went to Kentucky, not to Louisville. But you also had Craig Young a couple of years ago. He went to Kansas. You had Bryson Shaw, went to USC. Marcus Hooker went to Youngstown State. I mean, there's been a ton of turnover in that safety room. And I think by and large, they are pretty darn happy with where they are right now with Caleb Downs. And that it's like one of those swinging doors on the kitchen at the restaurant. That door swings both ways, and you can have a lot of guys leaving. But if you get a Caleb Downs coming in, yeah, that's probably okay. Lathan Ransom will be back. Obviously, he was sort of limited in the spring, but there's plenty of talent in that safety room. So, not any cause for concern for Ohio State here, and we'll see. We will see where he ends up now that he has entered the portal. Probably, they're probably not the last transfer portal departure for Ohio State this spring. Also, not technically the first transfer portal departure for Ohio State this spring. That would be running back Dallan Hayden. Now, we didn't do a separate breaking news show for Dallan Hayden because Dallan Hayden had more or less put the word out last week that he was going to be headed out of town and then was not at the practice last Friday, was not at the spring game on Saturday. That was a pretty good tip-off that this was coming. But Dallan Hayden has, in fact, entered the transfer portal. And he was a guy who definitely had his moments at Ohio State, Tony. And you look at that 2022 Maryland game was probably his signature game as Ohio State. But just even when a bunch of other running backs were banged up, just could never seem to get on the field on a regular basis.
Yeah, and Tony Alford and Ohio State opting to go with Chip Trayanum, Xavier Johnson at times over Hayden. And I still go back to the Maryland game where I believe he had 26 carries in the second half, which is insane. And then 30 carries since that game, the rest of his Ohio State career. So he seemed fine with redshirting last year in preparation for this year. But as I keep saying, when he agreed to redshirt, he probably viewed the 2024 season as not having Travion Henderson on the team. Certainly not having Quinshon Judkins on the team. So you add both of those guys in, and it's like, well, clearly if I want to play as much as I think I should, if I want to play as much as I thought I would when I was agreeing to not play at all last year, then I'm going to have to go do that somewhere else, because right now I'm looking at having the junior year that I had maybe as a freshman. And there's chances it might be the junior year that I had as a sophomore. And I'm not interested in that. I want to play. And so he can go plenty of places and play. And that's what he's doing.
And he has some family ties to Tennessee. That has been, long been considered one of the likely landing spots for him. If and when he did go into the portal, we will see if that is where he ends up. But it does feel like someone who is probably going to have a pretty productive career wherever he does land. So that is just the start of as the transfer portal turns. Should be an eventful few days, few weeks at BuckeyeHuddle.com as we talk about guys heading out in the portal. Buckeyes obviously doing a little shopping in the portal potentially as well. Could be some interesting names to watch there in addition to in addition to all of the recruiting news that we have coming, in addition to all of the team news that we'll be following over the spring and summer. Great place to do all of that is at BuckeyeHuddle.com and, of course, at YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle as well. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.